The Truman Show, since birth every second of his life has been captured by cameras broadcasted to the world. There's one catch, he's the only one unaware of it. The world's most well-known insurance salesman, Truman Burbank, The Truman Show is filmed in a dome on Florida's shore. The island is a meticulously crafted world that appears picturesque and tranquil. Every aspect of this world is carefully curated and controlled by the network corporation. Director Christof has been filming Truman since birth, capturing and managing every detail of his life. A seemingly ordinary morning takes an unexpected turn when a mysterious object falls from the sky as Truman greets his neighbors with his customary phrase, "Good morning, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night." He notices the strange object fallen from the clear sky. Despite his confusion, Truman rationalizes it as debris from an aircraft, as reported on the radio during his drive to work. Once at his job, he discreetly tears pieces of paper from a magazine and makes the call requesting directory information for Fiji, specifically asking for a Lauren or Sylvia Garland. Finding no leads, his boss Lawrence approaches him with a new task to close a deal on Harbor Island. Although reluctant, Truman heads towards the pier. But his fear of open water compels him to retreat back to work, unable to overcome his anxiety. At home, Truman tends to his garden until his wife, Meryl, returns from work with a cheerful demeanor. Later, he confides in his best friend, Marlon, about his desire to leave Sea Haven, quit his job, and travel to Fiji, reminiscing about a childhood dream to explore. Marlon pretends not to know about Fiji. That evening, Truman sits alone on the beach, recalling a tragic boating trip with his father, during which his father drowned in a storm. Suddenly, rain begins to fall solely on Truman, shocking him as he rushes home. The downpour intensifies. Truman shares his plan to go to Fiji with Meryl, but she dismisses it, prioritizing their financial responsibilities. When Truman suggests it could be an adventure, Meryl counters by proposing having a baby instead. The next morning, Truman spots a homeless man who resembles his father. Before he can approach him, obstacles appear. Truman runs after the bus as it drives away. The man is taken away. Truman later questions his mother about it, who believes it's wishful thinking. Truman reminisces while exploring his basement, stumbling upon a red sweater with a pen reading, "How will it end?" Memories transport him back to college, where he's drawn to an attractive woman named Lauren. Meryl, who has inexplicably become inseparable from him, introduces herself during that period. Truman encounters Lauren in the library one evening. They share a secretive moment, Lauren hastily scribbling, "Now," on a piece of paper, prompting them to flee the library together. Momentarily evading the surveillance cameras, Truman and Lauren share a kiss on the beach. Their moment is interrupted by the arrival of a vehicle. Lauren reveals her true name is Sylvia and attempts to disclose the reality of the show to Truman. However, her father intervenes, dismissing her claims and announcing their departure to Fiji. Truman is left bewildered as they drive away. Later, he discovers Sylvia's red sweater left behind as a tangible reminder of their encounter. The next day, Truman's car radio begins broadcasting his every move, revealing the surveillance he's under. Growing paranoid, Truman opts to walk instead of drive. He parks and dodges into a building. He enters the building and heads for the elevator. As the door opens, he discovers a room filled with people on a break. Security promptly removes him for trespassing, leaving Truman further perplexed about his reality. Confused, Truman spots Marlon's service vehicle parked. He attempts to convey his recent experiences to Marlon. Marlon dismisses it as Truman's attempt at humor. Truman pulls Marlon aside, emphasizing their friendship and confides in him that he plans to be away for a while. Returning home, Truman discovers Meryl and his mother looking at photos in an old album. Truman notices a picture of his wedding day with Meryl, and upon closer inspection, he realizes that Meryl's fingers are crossed, suggesting that she didn't marry Truman sincerely. The next day, Truman visits a travel agency to book a flight to Fiji, only to be informed that no flights are available for at least a month. Determined to leave, he attempts to take a bus to Chicago, but the bus breaks down before departing the station. When Meryl arrives home from work, she discovers Truman sitting in his car in the driveway, deeply absorbed in something. Joining him, she tries to engage, but Truman insists on silence and begins predicting the appearance of people passing by, suggesting they're following a fixed schedule. Meryl expresses concern about his behavior. Truman decides to test his theory on a larger scale. Truman drives off with Meryl, despite her protests. As they encounter a traffic jam, Truman maneuvers through a rotary multiple times, only to find the road clear upon returning. Approaching the bridge off the island, Truman's fear of water prevents him from crossing, so he impulsively hands the wheel to Meryl, ignoring warnings of forest fires. They encounter a major roadblock. A man informs them the power plant is seemingly in meltdown. He accidentally addresses Truman by name. Truman dashes out, continuing to flee the island, but he is quickly apprehended. At home, Meryl tries to comfort Truman with a drink. Her commercial-like behavior triggers Truman's confusion. As Truman becomes frantic, Meryl grows scared and grabs a peeler, prompting Truman to disarm her. Marlin arrives, seemingly unaware of the tension. Meryl seeks solace in Marlin's arms, expressing that the situation is not professional. Marlin takes Truman out for beers and tries to assure him that he wouldn't lie to him. In reality, Christoph is feeding Marlin his words through an earpiece. Marlin reveals that he found the homeless man Truman saw earlier, who turns out to be Truman's father. They embrace as Christoph orchestrates the scene from above, capturing Truman's emotional reunion with his father. The audience shares this moment through the screen. The show, True Talk, begins with Truman shown on a smaller screen while eating breakfast. Christoph is interviewed, revealing that Truman's father's death at sea was staged to instill a fear of water, preventing him from leaving the island. Bringing his father back aims to calm Truman's emotional turmoil and keep him on the island. Security measures were taken due to incidents like a fan hiding in a Christmas present to gain airtime. A caller, Sylvia, confronts Christoph for imprisoning Truman within a fabricated life. Christoph recognizes her voice. He claims he's provided Truman with a safe and normal existence, free from pain. He asserts that against all odds, Truman could leave if he discovers the truth. He announces that Meryl will be leaving the show. The next day, Truman appears normal and greets his neighbors before heading to work, where he meets a new coworker named Vivian. That evening, Truman rearranges his basement and falls asleep on a makeshift bed. Christoph becomes suspicious when Truman remains inactive for hours and orders the phone to ring in the house. With Truman still unresponsive, Christoph sends Marlin to investigate. Marlin finds a noise recorder and a hole in the basement floor, prompting Christoph to cut the transmission in shock. The halt in transmission shocks the world. Christoph sends the island staff for search parties. At an unreasonable hour, Christoph commands the sun to rise, aiding the search. Christoph suggests searching at sea. Cameras locate Truman on a sailboat. Christoph directs actors to bring him back. They are unable to navigate the boat. Christoph manipulates the weather to induce a storm and force Truman back to port, but Truman defiantly sails on. Frustrated, Christoph intensifies the storm, nearly causing Truman to fall overboard. Other staff members warn Christoph of the danger. He dismisses their concerns, citing Truman's birth being broadcasted to the world. Christoph ceases the weather manipulation, realizing Truman won't yield. Truman sails until he collides with the dome's end, discovering the fabricated reality. As Truman reaches for an exit door, Christoph addresses him directly, revealing himself as the creator of Truman's world. Christoph attempts to persuade Truman to stay, emphasizing a life free of suffering from the real world outside. As the entire world is watching, Truman gazes up and utters, "In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night." He bows before opening the door and exiting, and ecstatic Sylvia leaps up from her living room floor and rushes out of her apartment, while cheers erupted worldwide, marking the triumphant finale of The Truman Show. Christoph removes his earpiece and cuts the transmission,